Hi, my name is Ann Courtney, and I am a volunteer here at the Earl Burns Miller Japanese Garden. And I've been lucky enough to be here for 11 years. So we're going to do a tour today of the garden. Let me introduce you to it. Earl Burns Miller. He was a philanthropist here in Long Beach, and after he passed away, his wife Lorraine decided to create a garden because he liked gardens, and a Japanese garden because they had visited Japan and they liked that a lot. And she made a sizable donation here to the university and created this garden. They started designing it in 1979 and it opened in 1981. And I think I've been coming here since about 1982. I've seen pictures of this place from that time, and it's the same layout, but everything's very tiny. So we are going to stand in the courtyard now and take a look at what it has to offer you. The courtyard is a transition from the outside world out there to the inside garden, and it's a protection against the outside elements. It's a way to transition, and we're going to take a look at what's here in the courtyard and then move into the garden. So here in the courtyard, one of the coolest things are our bonsai collection. We've just installed some new gates, some new demonstration pieces. So we have rubber tree and azalea and camellia, and bonsai literally means in a dish. Comes from the tradition in Japan where there is a lot of people and not a lot of space. People would have a garden in a dish, and so they created this aesthetic, and you can see them over here. Let's take a look at this one. Most of our bonsai are donations, and some of them, like this, are purported to be 100 years old. When I look at them, I think of a forest, and there's little miniature hobbits down there. I just think they're wonderful. And we have different varieties, and depending, like these guys, camellias bloom in the winter, and azaleas bloom in the early spring, and they're just lovely. They are, in fact, not a specialized plant. They are a full-size plant, but they've been treated very carefully and created to grow in this little space. So if we turn around over here, right outside the gates, we have one of our sculptural lanterns. We call this a deer lantern. If you look at the bottom, you can see the hoof prints of a deer. You can see the split in its hoof. And over here, you can see an actually it's on this side, there's a deer. Now, why a deer lantern? In some temple areas in Japan, deer are sacred. They allow to run wild, and they are considered a very important animal. So that's why we have a deer lantern. We have a few more inside, and we'll see them inside. And then we're going to take a look at our gate. These very colorful pieces are temporary. They're part of a display. We're going to call it Tanabata. It's a July celebration, and later on we'll talk about the different seasonal celebrations that come from the Japanese culture. So let's go through the gate and see what's on the other side. So these are lion dogs, and they guard the way into the garden. What I want you to notice is whether or not they're the same. Look particularly at their mouths. This one's open, this one's closed. This one is making the sound at the beginning of the Japanese alphabet. It's a vowel sound, open mouth. This one portrays the end of the alphabet with the closed mouth, with the heavy consonant. They represent the beginning and the end. We say amongst the Greeks, or referencing the Greek alphabet, from the alpha to the omega, everything from beginning to end. This represents the beginning to the end, to take you into the garden. When you come in the gates, the first thing on your left is this massive display of Sego Palms. they're not native to Japan. They were brought to Japan by European missionaries coming, I believe, from the Philippines. But the thing that's really interesting about this plant is that it is one of the oldest existing plants on the planet. Sego Palms grew here with the dinosaurs. And it's called a cycad. And generally the way it reproduces, if we look down here, not so much seed as pups. That little guy is a clone of that guy, and it's a separate plant. You can cut them off and replant them. That's why it gets so dense. So right in the concrete, right by the Sego Palms, we have what I call the dragon tile. Dragons represent strength and another form of protection. And it's protecting us and guarding the garden and welcoming us all at the same time. Welcome to our garden. It is only 1.3 acres, but because of its design, it seems much bigger. Our garden is designated outdoor museum. We have two elements that make us museum quality. Our black pines. We have many of them. They have high monetary value. They cost tens of thousands of dollars, but not because of the plant. Because to make this shape, it takes many human hours. This is where the artist comes in. A garden is a mixture between nature and humankind. The gardener is the transition. The gardener brings his intention and his design, and that's what we've done here. We're going to take a look at other elements that make this garden. Let's take over here. So we have our black pines, and our other museum worthy are our koi. We have a lot of koi. People ask, how old are they? Well, the garden is now 40 plus years, but we've had to replace the koi due to various water conditions. The last time we replaced the koi was about 18 years ago, and maybe 20. So these guys may be a couple of years old, so maybe our oldest is 22. I've been told that in a pond this size, they can get up to 60 years old. In Japan, there are koi that are over 250 years old because they have a bigger space. We have lots of generations. We get a big crop of them, come up every spring. The females lay eggs, the males fertilize them. The little guys who are about maybe this big now, this is July. They are born generally in April, May. And they're this big, and then we have them in graduated sizes all the way up. I mentioned odd numbers. They're in landscaping and in the aesthetics of landscaping, Asian landscaping. We like odd numbers, not even. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. We say that our garden has 3 elements. We have water, we have vegetation, and we have stones. We'll see that repeated again and again. Right behind me is a 3-tiered pagoda, again representing that odd number. Our lion dogs are 2 singles. They're over there. And when we come around the other side of the garden, we'll see that we have a 5-tiered pagoda. So I mentioned black pines before, and I mentioned the fact that they are shaped. Some of the shapes have a name. I don't know them, but I've heard about that. And they're intensely creative. I've seen people go at them with tweezers. The Ueki Club comes in a couple of times a year and trims them and shapes them. Our residential gardeners spend a lot of time on them. Now, nature wants things to go up. And over here, I have a black pine that has not been shaped much. A little bit, not much. And it is the same species as this highly shaped, highly decorated mini black pines we have. We want the horizontal shape. And as we walk around, I'll point out a few times where you see that a tree will have a brace on it, or it'll be tied down to create the shape. You don't get that. Nature wants up, we want horizontal, and that's that merging between nature and the gardener. All right, so I said we have threes. Well, we say that we have 3 bridges. Sometimes this is called the platform bridge. I always call it the moon viewing bridge. If you're lucky enough to be here in the evening for an event, you can track the moon from that side to that side. So here's our moon viewing bridge. Over there, we have the Zig Zag Bridge. I have a great story when we get over there. And down all around the willow tree, you have the half moon bridge. So moon viewing, half moon, zigzag. And if we look down, we see our little friends, the beautiful koi, looking for us. They think we're going to feed them, but we're not going to feed them. Over here, we have a piece of sculpture referencing an Indian goddess. Buddhism started in India, went to China, went to Japan. Several elements that are currently in the Japanese culture came from India, so this is our nod to acknowledging that. So, the number 3. We say we have 3 bridges. We say we have 3 waterfalls. One over there by the Zig Zag Bridge. Okay? And then one over there in a little hillside behind the Half Moon Bridge. And when it rains, which is not too often, the water flows down here onto Black Rock Beach, and this is our 3rd waterfall. And while we're here, let's take a look at the Yamaguchi pine. And this is our premier black pine, valued at tens of thousands of dollars. And I have been told it's 100 years old or so. But here you can see the bamboo brace and the strings trying to create the shape. And this is our premier one, as I said. All right. Now, while we're here, let's look at that number 3 again. Willows. We call them willow terraces. We have 3 large willows. This one across on Willow Terrace, one across by the bridge. And we say that the willows represent the yin, the feminine. As the summer goes on and their leaves and boughs sweep, you can think of a woman with her hair bent over, curvilinear, representing the feminine. The black pines represent the yang, the masculine, upright, strong, vertical. In the middle of the pond, toward this end, we have an island. We call it Turtle Island. I do not know why, but it is inaccessible. Now, if we want to service that island, we have to lay down a plank bridge to go out and shape and work there. But the whole idea is that it represents the ideal place that you cannot get to. It is Avalon in the Arthurian story. It is Valhalla in the Nordic stories. It is heavenly. We can't get there on an ordinary basis, but we can reach for it as an idealized location. Okay, Half Moon Bridge. Now our bridge is relatively easy to get over because we are ADA compliant. But if you went to a traditional bridge, it would be almost a full moon. If you go to some Japanese gardens like the Huntington or San Francisco, it's really hard to get over. But we have to be able to get over it, so we do. Now we call it a half moon bridge or sometimes a rainbow bridge. Now there's a story. It's a Japanese creation story, the folk story, about Izanami and Izanagi. Izanagi is a male, Izanami is a female. They are deities in the heavens, and the other deities up there are looking down and they see this great, mushy, wet thing, which is going to become Earth, and they say, hey, let's go down there and do something. So they send Izanami and Izanagi down, and Izanagi has a samurai sword. And when he gets down to the surface, he takes his sword and he mixes it into this muddy water, and up comes a chunk of mud, and he throws it. And he does it again, and he does it 9 times. And what he threw were the 9 major islands of Japan. We're going to come back to that when we get to the Zen Garden. One of the ideas in the aesthetics of Japanese gardening is there are no straight lines in nature. And so everything is curvilinear. And consequently, our small-ish garden appears much more interesting. There's a lot of hide and reveal. You can't see what's around the corner. And every time we stop, you're going to get a different view because of that. So we're going to walk now up this little hill. We call this the forest path. We have a bunch of birch trees we put in a few years ago. They're replacements from the originals. We didn't really like our Southern California climate. And leading up to our tea house. A tea house is a respite in the Japanese garden, not just for us, but in Japan. And so when you come to the tea house, you're escaping from that other world, and you come over here and you would use this kind of device, this fountain, to purify yourself before attending a service in the tea house. There we have another of our deer lanterns. You can see the little footing on it. And then we're going to come over this way and take a look at our tea house. So, our tea house is a place of refuge. You leave the very busy world and you come here for respite. We see it as being in a forest, and then we come over here to our tea house, and it's pretty simple. We have lining the floor something called a tatami mat. It's made from rice strands, and they come in a very specific size, approximately 2.5 feet by 5 feet, using the measurements we would have. Different in Japan. I mean, the dimensions are the same, but they're not described the same way. And it's a way to say how big a room is. This is a 1, 2, 3, 4.5 tatami sized room. When you go to rent or buy or stay in a house or a room in Japan, traditional houses measure them by tatami size. I do square feet. When I rent a hotel or an apartment in Europe, I have to do square meters. And in Japan, I have to do tatami mats. So, you may think that this is a door. Not. This is a wall. Let me close the wall for you. You can open or close it depending on the weather. When the weather is good, like today, you would have it open. When the weather is chilly, you would have it closed. And in here, you would have your tea. In your tea house, there's usually going to be a table with some cushions around it, and that's about it. In the back, you have a seasonal scroll, and you have a flower display. Now we're getting ready for something called Tanabata, which is a star festival done in July. Remember I mentioned celebratory times. 1/1, January, New Year's. 3/3, Girls' Day. 5/5, Boys' Day. 7/7, thereabout, Tanabata. Some other stuff in the fall. Those are the traditional celebratory times. So, going back to the tea house, that's the decor you're seeing around right now. And over here, this is not a wall. This is a window, a door. Excuse me, not a door, it's a wall. Over here is the actual door. You would slide it, and then in order to get through it, you'd have to crawl. When people crawl through this, they're the same height. Social status becomes equal. A warrior visiting a traditional tea room would have to leave his weaponry and his armor out here. So it's a place of peace and negotiation. And that's our tea house. So this is another tile, kind of like the dragon one we had in the front entrance. This is a phoenix tile, and you can see the phoenix, the bird, which rises from its own ashes, clouds, a half moon bridge underneath it, and it's just another piece of Japanese culture imprinted on our walkway. There's always something in bloom here. It goes from season to season. This is summer. We have irises in bloom. We have canna in bloom. We have some cattails that won't open up until fall. Over here we have hydrangeas. And then we have some summer blooming azaleas over there. But you come here at different times and you see different things. This is our Zen Garden, and we can talk a little bit about Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is a unique to Japan Buddhism developed in Zen monasteries in Japan. And one of the modes of meditation is to do simple moves repetitively. And that's what happens here. You take a look at the stones in our garden. They are raked in a repetitive way, creating designs sometimes more simple than others. And in a monastery, after they're all raked, they would wipe them out and do it again as a repetitive form of meditation. Remember our threes. We have 3 grass islands here, and we have 9 stones. When I take little kids on this tour, we get to count in whatever language they have, 1 through 9. But these are the 9 main Japanese islands, going back to our story about Izanami and Izanagi. Right now, if you look at the patterns, you can see them over here in the shadow better. What we have are little circles that represent some of the stars of Tanabata. You have 2 merging here, and you have 1 over there, but it's hard to see in the bright light. Remember what I said about different things bloom at different times. Out here in the distant garden, we have ornamental pear trees, which are lovely most of the year. But the end of January, they are spectacular. They are our first bloomers. They go white and they fill the sky. And then, as they age into like beginning of February, the white particle leaves, petals come down and they fill in the little furrows here. And we call that Southern California snow. That guy's a crabapple. Right now he looks lovely, green, but come end of February, beginning of March, he's pink and white and just so lovely. Called the Zig Zag Bridge. All right, we're gonna go out. Remember our friends Izanami the lady, Izanagi the man? Well, she was responsible for birthing all the elements of the earthly universe. So she birthed the sun and the moon and the stars and the elements on the earth. And way along, when she gave birth to the god of fire, she perished. You know, you birth a fiery ball and you die. All right, so she goes to the land of the dead, and Izanagi feels really bad about this. He wants her back. So he trots on down to the land of the dead. And she said, wait, don't look at me. I have to ask permission, and then I can go with you. But he doesn't wait, and he looks at her, and she doesn't look like she's been in the ground for months, and he's paid. Woo-hoo! And so he starts to run away. And the demons controlling the land of the dead are annoyed that he didn't ask permission. So he starts to run, and he runs in a zigzag pattern because the demons only run in a straight line. Now, how did he know that? I don't know. Probably checked Wikipedia. All right, and so at the end of the zigzag bridge, which is what this represents, he puts a big stone to keep people from traveling into the land of the dead. And there's our family. Everyone's here. And if we take another look at the pattern of the garden, different view, different change. Okay, we talked about 1, 3, 5. This pagoda has 5 tiers, using those odd numbers. And if you look straight to the left of that, you can see a serious bamboo support for this limb, which is another ornamental pear tree, one of those ones that go wonderfully white around Valentine's Day, late January, early February.